Hello everybody. Today I want to show you how to use Apache Nifi, a data flow management tool, together with the Ruleengine, and what are the benefits of doing so. As you can see on the screen here, this is a data flow in Apache Nifi. What I'm doing here is I first read data from a CSV file. This data will run through the Ruleengine processor. Next, an evaluation is done if the data passed the business logic, and if so, the data is output to a file, or the data that failed the business logic will go to a different file. Additionally, for those that failed the business logic, I will output all the details also to a file, and these details will show in detail why the data did not pass the business rules. So the data flow starts at this point, at the tail file. So whenever I add a new line to the CSV file, this processor will pick it up and forward it to the next processor. The Ruleengine processor references business logic, and this business logic is defined in a file, and this file is created with a web application which allows the user to orchestrate, define complex business logic in a simple way through a web interface. Okay, let's start and do an example. So here's the tail file processor, and it waits for new lines in the CSV file it references. So below here I have a terminal, and I'm just going to add some data to the file. The data I add is a last name of a person, a first name, age, if the user has a driver's license, and if it's willing to pay an extra fee at under certain circumstances. I will explain this in more detail later. Okay, let's add a line now. Okay, I added a line to the CSV file. Now the ExecuteRuleengine processor received this file, applied the business logic, then it went to the next processor, which checks if a certain attribute is set or not. And from this attribute, it forwards the result either to the matched or to the unmatched relation, and it creates an output file. Now here I have 3 windows of my file browser, and it shows the files that are output by the different processors. So the data we added here ends up in a new file in the past folder. So the data I added passed the business logic, and actually it's the same data as the input file. Okay, now let's have a look at the business logic. The business logic that was applied as I said, is defined in a web application, so I will switch to that page. I log into the Business Rules maintenance tool, go to Projects. Now this is my project I have defined containing the business logic. And here is now the logic that is applied to the data. First, it is checked if the user has a valid driver's license. This is actually the first true field in the data I added to the CSV file. Then the age of the user is checked, in this case 50. And it is checked if the age is above 26 or above. Or you can see here in this group we have an or condition. Or if the user is not 26 or above, then another rule will check if the user is willing to pay an extra fee. So if the user is younger, he can still rent a car, but needs to pay an extra fee if he's okay to do so. And that is the second true condition here in the data. Okay, so this is my business logic. I can export it here from the tool. It will end up in a file. And if I go back to the data flow, the rule engine processor here references this file with the business logic. And based on that, an evaluation can be done if the data passed the business logic or not. Okay, let's add some more data. I add a different user, age of 20. The user has a driver's license. And the user is willing to pay an extra fee in case that he's younger than 26. Okay, if we add this now, you saw it pop up here. Again, it went through the tail file processor, it picked the new line up, executed through the rule engine. The result was routed either to passed or failed. You saw the data passed again. Okay, now let's do an example where the data does not pass the business logic. Let's say the user is 30, but the user does not have a driver's license. Okay, again it went through the flow. This time, as we expected, the data ended up in a file in the failed folder. So the data did not pass this time, but it failed. And as indicated before, here I have an output for all the data that fails and the details of why it failed are shown in this file. And if I switch to this file, Now this is the file that has been produced, and it shows the details. And for each rule that is defined in the business logic, the result is displayed. So I have one input rule, one input row, and I have 3 rules and 1 input row. So the result is 3 rows of details. Okay, so at the start of the file you see the original data, and then after that the details from the Ruleengine execution are shown. So you can see the name of the group that was run. You can see which field was checked. And then at the end you can see why a rule passed or not. Okay. So the first row says field driver's license for false, which is the actual value that we added, is not equal to true. Because as we've seen before in the business logic, this is what is checked. The next rule is checking if the age is correct, and the other one is checking if an extra fee would be paid if necessary. Okay, so here you have the explanation of why your business logic did not pass. If we go back to the business logic again, this is what the Ruleengine did. It checks if the driver has a valid license, in this case not. And it checks if the age is in the correct range and if the user is willing to pay an extra fee. So what is now the advantage of using this approach? The advantage is that your business logic is not hard-coded in your data flow. So if the business logic changes because the business has new requirements, they have new contracts with customers, or well, the logic changes, then you won't have to touch your data flow. It stays like it is. And the only thing you have to do is to change the logic in the business rules maintenance tool. Now, this also, if you have a look at it from the side of responsibilities, IT would be responsible for the data flow. This is really an IT tool for managing data flows. But the business logic is really defined by the business experts. If we hard code the business logic into the data flow, it will be IT who is responsible for both the technical IT stuff, the data flow, plus handling the business logic somewhere in the flow. By having the business logic externally defined, you can now go to the business, to your marketing department or to other people from the business and have them define the business logic. So it's a clear responsibility, a division of responsibility between the IT department and the business department. Plus, the business is not so much IT. The business department and the business people do not normally know a lot about IT. So if you hard code your business logic in the data flow, it's hard for them to understand what happens because it's an IT tool. But if they have a web application which is targeted for easy use for the user without any relation to the IT side, that's much easier for them to accomplish. Okay, now let's change the business rules and see what happens. Okay, we still have the rule which checks for the valid driver's license, and here we have the rule that checks if a person is greater or equal to 26. Let's change that because we do not have defined an upper limit. So let's say we want to change this. So we go into this rule and let's say we want to check now if the age is between a certain range. Let's say between 26 and 75. And then we save it. You can now see here, oh, I haven't changed the actual description here, but you can see here that the rule for the age is now checking if the age is between 26 and 75. Okay, now let's assume that's all I have to do. The logic has changed now, of course, a little bit. It checks for a valid driver's license and it checks if the age is between this range, and if it's not between this range, it will check if the person is willing to pay an extra fee. Okay, my business logic is complete. I'm going to export the new logic now to a file. I have to select the project. And I generate the file. Okay, I go back to my data flow. Now my data flow is running all the time and it's still referencing the old business logic. I will stop the processor and simply restart it. And what will happen now is that the processor will pick up the new business logic because the file has changed and the file date has changed, and it will pick it up. Okay, that's all we have to do. As you can see, we have not changed anything in the data flow. We have only changed the business logic, and in a perfect case, this was done by somebody from a business department and not from IT. Okay, now let's add again a row, and now let's add a row that fails the logic. Okay, let's say Bob is added. He is 18. Bob has a driver's license, but he is not willing to pay an extra fee in case that is required. Okay, let's add Bob. As you can see here and here, the data for Bob failed the business logic and details were produced. Let's have a look at the results again. Now these are the results for Bob. We have 3 rules, so we have 3 rows. So the first check is done on the driver's license, and it says the driver's license is correct, is correctly equal to true. Then the age was checked, and this rule failed because Bob is above this range. He's 80 and the upper limit is 75. Okay. And the next rule also failed because Bob is not willing to pay an extra fee. This was defined by this false condition here. Okay, so what you've seen is we have changed the logic. We have set up a range, and before we had just a lower limit of 26, and it was processed by the data flow. So as you can see, your data flow stays the same, your business logic can change, and that is very good for quality, because each time you touch a complex data flow, there's a possibility for errors. So because you excluded the business logic, you have a reference to the business logic instead of hard coding it in the data flow. The data flow gets much simpler. And because it's simpler, that's very good for quality. It's also more agile. It's easier to change because now the data flow concentrates on IT processing tasks and not on business logic. On the other side, the user has, through the web application, a very easy way to define, orchestrate complex business logic. Now, in this example, we only have 3 rules, and this is quite easy. But you can create very complex scenarios which are easily constructed by a normal user, not the IT department. And it will help you enhance the quality, make the data flow easier, have a correct division of responsibilities between the business and the IT department, and thus it will be a win-win situation for both sides of it. IT does the IT stuff and the business defines the business rules because they are the experts for the rules. The ExecuteRuleengine processor for Apache Nifi is not part of the standard product, but you can download it from my GitHub account, which is github.com/Uwe Gerken. The web application is also available there for download. It's free, and it has an Apache license, so you are free to use it, integrate it into your projects. And on the GitHub site there's more to download, and I welcome you also to have a look at my blog, where there are a lot of examples, explanations for using the rule engine. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.